Good day. Today is November 26, 2025. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I'm here with the OG Pipeline crew, former Western Standard opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
That would be me. Good to be here.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Well, we're going to get into one topic that no one likes to talk about because everyone gets angry. We'll maybe even get angry with each other on this show here. We're talking about late-term abortions in Canada. We're told it's exceptionally rare and only in medically necessary situations. A new documentary out would seem to show, I think, fairly definitively that is very much not the case. So we're going to be talking about about the touchiest subject you could find in Canada, and almost anywhere really, but we're gonna talk about late-term abortions. The total recall against Alberta UCP MLAs continues. I think we're up to 6 or 8 or so, somewhere around there.
14 now.
14 who have had approved petitions.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's just an application form. It's really...
It doesn't mean much yet. But efforts to recall, essentially, the whole enough UCP MLAs to collapse the government, trigger an election, I guess. Be careful what you wish for, guys. I'm not sure you want an election right now. But some people are saying that process is being abused. We need to change the recall legislation. I'm not so sure. You want recall, you got to accept it when it's used against you too. But we'll get into it. But first, did Danielle Smith's demands of Mark Carney's federal Liberal government work? The premier, laid down a series of 9 demands. I think it may have been earlier in the summer, maybe even the spring. It was some time ago. She laid down these demands, and this is all in the background of the looming, likely-ish Alberta referendum on independence coming, saying, look, if you, it was kind of an or else. And she didn't say what the or else was, but it was more or less or else. I'm not going to be doing much on the stay side of the referendum. I think was kind of the implication. Not sure if that's fair or not. But she laid out these demands. They were not all about oil and gas development and pipelines, but I'd say it's fair. The bulk of them were. There were some items on equalization. Surprise, there hasn't been a peep on equalization. Nothing will ever seem to change there. But there does, knock on wood, appear to be some movement on the natural resource development side of things. Tomorrow, Thursday, Danielle Smith and Mark Carney are appearing at the Chamber of Commerce, where they're going to sign or present a memorandum of understanding. MOUs actually don't really mean anything. They're just it's an agreement to an agreement. I was a bureaucrat for 1 year of my life, and we signed an MOU. I was like, oh my God, this is a big deal. It was on internal free trade in Canada. Guess what? Nothing came of it. We spent years on it to get an MOU, and nothing came. So, so it's about exceptions from the emissions caps, exceptions from the Northwest Coast tanker ban, things like that would make a pipeline feasible. But David Eby is saying, wait a minute, you can't treat me like an Albertan. I get to have some say in this. And so he's squawking that he hasn't been consulted and given his permission. Some of the BC native bands are saying something similar. I don't know. Do we have much to cheer about yet?
I don't think so. I would actually love to be cheering about this, but here in Alberta, we spend so much time thinking about it from our point of view that we don't always think about how the federal government is seeing it and how Mr. Carney in particular is seeing it. Now, I mean, we've got 9 demands. What does Mr. Carney have that he wants to get done? He wants the problem to go away. Uh-huh. He wants actually the appearance of a settlement. He's just come back from a meeting in Brazil where everybody was talking about how to take the carbon out of the climate, and now he's got to come back and he's expected to work out something with the Premier of Alberta who wants to develop more oil. So what he's doing is building a situation where it looks like he's agreeing, but he's got an escape route. He won't have to go through with it. I am very pessimistic about this particular. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I actually don't see any good coming out of this. He has, apart from a constituency that's interested in climate change, he himself has made it very clear how he sees the climate change. He's not. He wants to get less carbon emitted. He's come up with this crazy idea that in order to produce oil in the West, you must vary an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide to what it took to make the oil. Nothing like that in the East where they're importing it. And now you just mentioned the condition that BC has to agree and the indigenous peoples there have to agree. There is his escape route. They will not agree. Thanks, Danielle. It was great talking, but we're not doing anything because BC doesn't agree. Well, wait a minute. You intruded in our space provincially, intrude on theirs. Well,
Well,
bring the bowl of water.
Well,
wash my hands of it.
Yeah. Well, Cory, none of this requires intrusion actually on provincial jurisdiction. Interprovincial trade of this kind, infrastructure crossing provincial and national boundaries or international boundaries, is strict federal jurisdiction. The Supreme Court ruled on that. That was, one of the rare times where the Supreme Court's actually made a sensible... Because it's written in black and white in the British North America Act that assigns the powers one way or another. So it's pretty clear that that's federal jurisdiction. The court ruled that David Eby and the BC NDP have no standing, whatever, constitutional standing, whatever, to interfere. But, I mean, we haven't seen the MOU yet. So I don't want to prejudge it. I just think as Albertans, we've played the Charlie Brown football enough by now that maybe we're overly cynical. I don't know. Are we overly cynical here? Or is he going to be, are BC natives and the BC government, which one of those seniors soon will who knows? But are they going to? You expect they'll actually be given a real veto of some kind, or it's just the MOU will require some basic duty to consult, which would that's fine. I actually think that's appropriate. I don't know. Am I overly cynical?
Part of it is you're not overly cynical, and part of it, I was saying to Nigel earlier, and I've got limited in what I could say, but a little bird told me there is nothing in the MOU that does give a veto to the First Nations or the province of BC, nor should it, because it's not constitutional, as you pointed out, both with First Nations and BC. So Carney has to be a prime minister, and he doesn't seem to be willing to. This is fully in his hands. He says it's getting done or it's not. And what's missing in all of this, I think, or not enough discussion. Maybe that'll pop over the MOU. Where's the private proponent? That's the excuse they like using too. There's no private proponent. Well, none of them are going to unless they can get through.
Yeah.
So they need to see something with the prime minister saying this pipe is going to reach the coast. Not this pipe, if we meet this giant long list of conditions, well, nobody's going to pull their wallet out. No, he's got to be saying, I support this, and I'm going to facilitate it. And we can't say that, we'll need 10, 20 years of consultation either, because it's been done already. The Northern Gateway, Enbridge already spent, 100 and some million or some. They've done the consultation. I know it expired, but you know what? The mountains are in the same place. The rivers are in the same spot. If anything, pipelines have gotten even better. We have to fast track this, or it's not happening. So it's going to be interesting, as I say, leading into an AGM for Premier Smith to get out and try and tell the members she has accomplished something and there has been progress, because they're as cynical as we are for the most part, and they want to see her either standing up for Alberta or actually having an agreement that says this pipe is going to go. Not, we've got another MOU. We're going to talk about it for 10 more years while it dies on the vine.
Cory, to your point, the Western Standard has today published the following comment by Mr. Carney in the House of Commons. Word for words, the memorandum of understanding that we're negotiating with Alberta creates the necessary conditions, but not sufficient conditions, because we believe in cooperative federalism. We believe the government of BC has to agree. We believe that First Nations right holders in this country have to agree and support all stakeholders. Yeah. So there already he has laid down the conditions On which he says, well, I did my best.
And there's already First Nations saying that they're never going to support it under any circumstances. That's where we got to define that difference between consultation and consent. We aren't obligated to get consent. And obviously they're saying they're never going to give it. So at this point, it's either tell them to go get stuffed, we're doing this, or just give up. That's the two options they got now.
So I don't know how much of this is Carney saying one thing. I'm not sure if that was in response to an NDP question or a conservative question.
I think it was Conservatives were putting him against the wall.
Yeah. So I have a hard time believing that Danielle Smith is going to be willing to stand next to Mark Carney at a press conference and put her name to something that would give BC and Native groups in BC a veto one day before the opening of the UCP convention, where she's going to face the most hardcore folks in the right who are, I mean, we've been around these folks. They eat leaders for brunch. So when she goes into there, she likes to flex her Alberta first bona fides. So I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to think that she's going to do this one day before facing that kind of crowd.
Well, from what I've heard, like I said, that's not in the MOU. So that perhaps tomorrow it might be an interesting conference, because if that comes to the opportunity where she might have to put him on the spot there and say, well, just to clarify, this is not giving a veto to such and such, and make him answer it there, because he was absent from question period on this today anyway. Mm-hmm. So that would be a whole different question. Now, if it was a sabotage, I mean, we really want to see provincial-federal relations go bad, during a conference where they're supposed to be holding hands and smiling. But, I mean, if she's being undercut before this thing's even signed, perhaps the premier will have good enough cause to put him to the question while they're standing in front of the cameras.
Yeah. I mean, it is... I mean, the United Conservative Party very much inherited from the Wild Rose, the kind of Alberta first strain of DNA in that party's blood. Actually, in many ways, I think the UCP is more Alberta first than the Wild Rose was. I think that's just the Overton window was shifted.
Yeah, well, it's just because the issues are more prescient now, too, than they had been at that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, the politics, it's always good politics for the Alberta UCP premier to be fighting like hell against the federal Liberal prime minister. That's good politics. So for her to not play that card and stand next to him at a podium the day before convention leads me to think, in all probability, maybe she's lost her marbles and gone soft, but in all probability, I would bet that she's got a fair degree of faith in it, because she doesn't like, there's going to be some people on the harder independence, sovereigntist, right side of the party who are critics, and they're going to just take a picture of her standing at a podium, and that's a bad meme. That's a bad meme. So if she's going to give them that, she's probably got to have a fair degree of certainty that, no, this is a real thing.
Well, I think it's going to go one way or the other. There can't be a mushy middle on this. She has to be standing at that podium to have something that can be taken to the bank. Like, this is an agreement, and she has to have the prime minister very strongly saying this is going to get done. Or if it's some mushy, we're just signing this again and we're going to tread water for months, as you said, well, then something has made her addled, because she understands that nobody going into an AGM wants a mushy middle position. Or if it blows up tomorrow, that goes well going into an AGM as well, because then you give the fire and brimstone speech saying, we tried, we did everything we could. I took my time the day before this to try and come out and do this, and he torpedoed us before we could even get it rolling. I guess we have to look at other alternatives as Albertans to get our resources to market. Exactly. But a middle is not going to look good.
Yeah, and this is in the context of a probable referendum some point next year on independence. Thank you for all your hard work on that, Thomas Nikasic. I appreciate you volunteering your time and your Winnebago or whatever, driving around Alberta, getting signatures so that we can have a vote on independence. It was very generous of the cause.
He is forward-thinking sometimes.
God, you just can't make this shit up sometimes.
Or he was probably buzzing from the hairspray and wasn't thinking clearly.
Yeah. But there's a probable referendum on independence coming. I mean, if there is tangible, like, you got a shovel in the ground somewhere. I mean, it's no pipeline's going to be done and pumping by that time. That's not reasonable. But if you had a shovel in the ground by the time people vote, I think it would make it damn near impossible for the independent side to win that. And I think it is sad that the whole independence argument gets reduced to just pipelines. It is a hell of a lot more than pipe. In fact, it should maybe be at the bottom of the top 5 list at this point. I'd say controlling our simple borders might be at the top. If we can't control the Canadian border, then let's at least control the Alberta border. A lot of things. But I think in terms of the discussion, I mean, the independent side always had the much bigger hill to climb to have any chance of winning. If there's real progress and it's like, yeah, no, we're actually building this. There's crews out there right now. There's pictures. There's video of guys digging holes and laying pipe. I think that kills the chance of winning an independence vote.
It would indicate that other things can get done as well. I mean, that's one symbol. So we're saying, well, if it could be negotiated to get a pipeline through, then maybe it's possible to negotiate on immigration or negotiate on equalization or some of those other areas. So it will be a big symbolic win that would undercut the independence movement strongly. But they got to move fast. You know, people are impatient. That's the bottom line. They don't want to see it. I mean, Carney loves his hockey analogies. Well, it looks to us like he's ragging the puck. And people don't have time for it anymore. You get something going or quit playing us.
Well, people in Alberta don't have any time for it anymore. Maybe this plays really well back in central Canada.
Oh, very possible.
Anyway, he's taking the cousins to Alberta, and he's going to lay about the Alberta government. Tell them exactly where they stand. That won't play well in Alberta, but that could be Christo's Mill in Ontario, Quebec.
Yeah, we can't always look at it through our lenses.
Well, that's the thing. It's very easy to forget what might be in it for him.
Yeah, because where does some of his MPs are getting pretty upset with the possibility.
Some of the BC ones who are kind of doctrinaire on this stuff. Yeah, sure. All right, well, speaking of laying into the Alberta government, let's talk about the recall campaign. We've gotten into this before. So this is coming out of the Alberta UCP government, legislating an end to the teacher strike, sending them back to work. They still legislated them a sweetheart deal. I mean, it was a great friggin' deal that they got for themselves. I thought the UCP should have legislated them back to work with a pay cut. Not even
ordered more charter schools to be transferred, as you said. I like that.
Yeah. Actually, I don't think they actually should have legislated them back to work. I think they just should have said every day convert a public school into a charter school until the union begs for an end to the strike. Walk them out, essentially, was what I'd say. That's not what happened. Anyway, the ATA was legislated back to work. They lost their shit. They got very, very angry. The notwithstanding clause was used, so it's just bulletproof from legal challenge because the Supreme Court's made some bizarre rulings in the last years where apparently individual rights are also now union rights. Unions have the same rights as individuals. So they lost their mind and they decided to initiate recall campaigns against Alberta UCP MLAs. Now, some of them seem pretty dumb. They're going after MLAs who had massive margins of victory. I guess Danielle Smith had a big margin of victory in Brooks Medicine Hat, but she's the premier. She's very symbolic, so they may as well take a shot at that, I guess. They're going after other ones who have big margins of victory, like up in Grand Prairie. And then other ones, now the one that I think is probably their smartest to go after, sorry, Demetrios, is the education minister. He's symbolic. He's the education minister. They hate him. And Calgary Bow had an extremely... his constituency in Calgary Bow had a very, very narrow margin of victory for him. So strategically or tactically, that's maybe a smarter one. But they're going after all sorts of others. Angela Pitt, she had a pretty big margin of victory. But they're going after them very clearly based on government policy. And a lot in the UCP are stating that, well, that's not fair game. We need to change the rules around here. Now, some of it, I think, is more legitimate complaints, like the legislation says that the people who are canvassing for signatures have to live in the constituency. I actually don't think that should be a rule necessarily because constituencies, as I could tell my experience, get gerrymandered. They're arbitrary.
I strongly differ on that part.
Yeah, it is. Okay, but maybe they have to at least be in an adjacent one. Because constituencies, particularly urban ones, I mean, you live on one side of a street, you're in one constituency. You live on the other side of the street, you're in another. And it's just some dink sitting in a commission somewhere appointed by political parties who drew that. Sometimes...
Well, I know it. I live 800 meters from a UCP member, and I have an NDP member for mine. I'm half a mile out of the border, and they gerrymandered it actually because they wanted an NDP rural seat, so they made that one. It frustrates me, but I still think when it comes to overturning an MLA, it should only be the people living under that constituency.
In an election, you're allowed to campaign in any constituency you want. In fact, people come from other provinces, even other countries, and campaign.
Yeah.
So, if you're allowed to go and volunteer to elect someone in a different riding, we do it in general elections and by-elections, I think you should be allowed to do it for recall too. And, let's remember, a lot of people who are against what's happening with recall here right now, we were all gearing up to recall Jason Kenney, but from the right.
Yeah. But that was province-wide.
That was to recall him in his own seat. He was going to probably end up getting recall if
potential
until essentially the party recalled him by forcing a leadership review of him. They recalled him at the leadership level, but he was good to otherwise probably get recalled at the MLA level. So I guess there's 2 points. One is the rules are you have to live in the riding. I don't think it's a good rule, but that is the rule, and that appears very much to be aggressively violated by the organizers here. I think the UCP have got a point there, even if I think it's a bad part of the law. Where I think they don't have a point is they're saying, well, you're just disagreeing with us on government policy. You have to have a very specific reason, some kind of misconduct to recall someone. I don't think so. Again, you've got what's a big deal for someone might not be like Bev Oda. People got pissed off because she had $28 glass of orange juice. I mean, this poor lady.
It was 15.
16, sorry. With inflation, it's 28.
Yeah,
a $16 glass of orange juice. That is not a serious thing, but it blew up into a serious thing. So then is a judge going to sit there and say, well, this is worthy of recall and this is not? Broken promises. Sometimes promises are legitimately broken. You made a promise, you got in, turns out the facts on the ground are different, or the government's got no money. Hey, we don't actually have money for this anymore. Are we really going to let have a court decide if a politician broke his promise, or if this scandal is serious or non-serious? I think the UCP are kind of grasping at straws on this thing, saying that, well, you have to have a better reason that you disagree with the government policy.
They pulled the trigger on the government's own policy. It's the sort of thing I've done in the past. My NDP nomination run, when they left it wide open for anybody to register
policies against
and be on there. And then it's amazing they changed their policies within 2 weeks. And suddenly I disappeared as an NDP nomination candidate.
Let's make sure we pull up a picture from Cory's nomination. There, he's
and I ran hard.
You ran for the nomination. Was it Bev Kananaskis?
Yes.
You had the... pardon the language, you had the pussy hat and everything.
Yeah. It was probably dressed in NDP wear for the time.
Yeah.
And then they shut down my campaign. But that's using their policies against them. That's what they're doing with the recall. As annoying as it may be.
It's fair game.
It is. And I don't think as long as those rules are followed that they're going to succeed in many, if any of them. As you said, Highwood, they're going after RJ Sigurdsson. They've never had under 70% support for the UCP there. I would not want to be a door knocker going to the door saying, hey, will you sign this petition with your name, address? Because that's the thing people got to realize. Right now, all they're doing is putting in a form and a fee. Anybody can do that. That takes 20 minutes.
Yeah.
The news is reporting it as if there's this wave. Well,
then there's a vote on if there will be a by-election.
Yes. So this is a long process. So you have to get signatures from 60% of the people who voted in the last election within a time frame. You can't flood it with outside help. And rest assured, there will be a lot of UCP supporters who will want to see a couple violations because that'll give them an excuse to say this is invalid and thrown out. As you said, Covery Bow is maybe the closest they could come to it. But even then, that's a tough task. I mean, not everybody's eager to see a by-election or whatnot. Even some who don't like the MLA, they might say, well, I'll still hang on till the next election. Like, I like recall and referendum legislation. I like using Switzerland as a model. But something that's different there is the citizens take it very seriously. So if somebody shows up with a frivolous campaign at their door and says, will you sign this? They'll say, no, I'm not interested. Not that Canadian politeness, so I'll just sign. No, I don't like this. I won't sign. So it's incumbent, I think, on the citizens.
It's taking time for that culture to develop here. Like, they haven't had initiative. We haven't had recall in any practical way until pretty much now.
They're putting it to the test. And
if people get the idea that this is a serious effort by the opposition to dethrone the government, not just take out an MLA who has been an idiot, then the tide is going to turn against this recall. Now, that's the thing. They have to get that message out. Because otherwise, people are saying, "Oh, whatever,"
Yeah,
like stuff that goes.
But the complaint is saying, like the UCP is talking about changing some of the rules. They haven't said definitively.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you can, because it becomes pretty subjective when you're getting into what is or
It
isn't.
really should be. I've been disagreeing.
I think on a communications front, you can say that these guys are being frivolous or wrong.
Totally.
Just don't change the rules. Like the example I use is Dar Hetherington. I keep bringing her up. And for those who remember, you might not have been in Alberta at the time yet. She was a city councillor in Lethbridge who went very much off the rails. A fake kidnapping story, took off to Las Vegas. Very bizarre.
Mhm.
But they couldn't get rid of her. She still had that seat on council, and as loopy as she'd been and so on, she potentially could have been stuck in there for years, because you just have no mechanism to have somebody, even though they've proven themselves, just to, she needed treatment, not a seat. I mean, just it's a mental health thing. But
No, are you sure it's Lethbridge? I thought it was in Edmonton.
No, it's Lethbridge.
Edmonton councillor who would totally.
You're thinking of Tucker Gomberg. And that poor fellow ended up committing suicide jumping off Confederation Bridge. He wanted to flood the Edmonton city streets to build so people could skate to work.
I've heard worse ideas for Edmonton.
Yeah, but he was a city councilor. But similar sorts of things. You see, when they are so clearly, though, something has happened or whatever, or they've done something where they just are no longer fit, we don't have a mechanism to remove them. But theoretically, it should just only be when it gets that bad before you really start doing it. But how do you put gates to make sure that doesn't happen? That's the hard part.
And I'm not saying this is the UCP's plan. It's not, as far as we know. But, some prominent voices within it are saying, and some of the MLAs being subject to this are saying, well, no, the rules should say, there has to be clear misconduct. Well, what that means, that's going to become a legal case. And
yeah, misconduct's a different thing, too.
Okay, so look, Sean Chu, the Calgary City Councillor, was in pretty hot water, but he was never charged and convicted with a crime. He did some things which were questionable a long time ago, and voters deserved to render their decision. But he kind of, the way with advance voting, he still got elected, couldn't be recalled. Okay, but is it always criminal behavior? Not many are going to be.
I think criminal makes it more clear. They'll often just resign in disgrace, anyways. But
also,
it's those.
But also, what if it's a politician refuses to hand over their gun to the cops? Okay, well, that's criminal, technically. But, it just gets way too subjective. You have recall, or you don't have recall. And the general rule of thumb is you're going to agree with the reason when it's a politician you don't like and you want to recall. And you're going to disagree with it when it's a politician you do like who's on your side.
Well, if a person's principled, they wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't want to see one against Nenshi, because it would just be a waste of paper, a waste of pounding the street. I'd love to see Nenshi gone. I've got no use for the man.
But I wouldn't sign the petition. I
want to see. He was popularly elected in Edmonton Strathcona. Nobody other than NDP is ever going to win that seat. Quit wasting time. Let's get on with bigger issues. But well, it's interesting to see what's going to happen, because if they come out and shoot down their own legislation, it will undercut the UCP, and it's going to look.
It'll look bad. It would look bad if they did. I think they could. There's some tweaking on the administrative side. I actually think you should not have to live specifically in the constituency, because the boundaries are so often arbitrary. You're on one side of the street or you're on the other. I think maybe they should say you have to live in it or in an adjacent riding to it. So you're living in the general area. So even a gerrymandered riding, people who are naturally a part of that area can still participate. I think that.
But can't vote.
Well, no. Only people in that riding can vote and sign a petition to recall. But they can go into there and, carry
up on yours and carry petitions.
Yeah, because we allow it for elections. Why would we not allow it for this?
Well, maybe we shouldn't allow it for elections. But with elections, it's a party, and it's a provincial-wide thing, which is a little different. I mean, we know exactly what will happen if you open it up. Old Gill is...
You got a by-election.
Yeah.
People come in from around the country to go for a
and that's what'll happen with these if we open it right up. So old Gill and his gang of union hacks are just going to flood into a constituency and pound every door 100 times over. People will sign just to get these union nuts to stop harassing them.
Well, that's what people were going to do against Jason Kenney, but from the right, get rid of him during.
They shouldn't have done that either on the local level. Get rid of him as a leader, but as far as an MLA goes, I think that's up to the constituents.
Yeah. Well, in this case, the Conservatives have a fairly thin majority. So actually, if you got just a few, boom, all of a sudden the government's lost its majority, and at that point you're not going to get by-elections. Premier just calls an election.
Yeah,
which is what would happen.
Was what would happen.
And I mean, you never know what's going to happen, but based on the polls, I don't think it's going to be.
It could be a careful what you wish for circumstance, just like Fabio and his referendum petition. Thanks again.
Thanks for that. Thanks for calling an early election. Because I tell you, there's a lot of people in the UCP who would like to call an early election.
Renew their mandate.
They're strong in the polls. They got money in the bank. They're ready for an election. But it looks bad to call an early election, especially when you've got a fixed election date. Danielle Smith remembers what happened to Jim Prentice.
Yeah.
I mean, this would give them all the excuse that they need. It'd be a pretty good one. Okay. Oh, jeez. Okay, we're gonna talk about this one. Late-term abortions. So I think what's called Right Now, it's a kind of student pro-life group, came out to put out a documentary around late-term abortions, and then what's the term? Live birth abortions, which is about the most horrific form it can take. I mean, we're told Canada is pretty much the only country, if not the only country on the planet that has no legislative framework of any kind around abortion. It's just kind of a black hole. It's a legislative hole. It's not technically legal. It's not technically illegal. It's just there, it's floating in space.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told that late-term abortions do not happen on an elective basis. It's just not a thing. They're extremely rare, and they're for medically necessary purposes. And if that was the case, where, like if a woman is going to die, I mean, of course, we should not have two people die. It's a terrible situation, but yeah, of course. I think most people would agree with that. But that is not actually what is happening here. So this group, they put out their documentary, and they went around to a number of abortion clinics, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, I think. And it was a woman. She went in, over 20 weeks pregnant, says, I want an abortion. And they're like, okay, like, no problem, casual.
Mm-hmm.
No, she says, any restrictions? And they're like, no. I mean, she's like, do I have to be at risk or anything? Or just like, I just want to end it. And like, she's obviously got an undercover camera here.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like blasé, like this is just a normal administrative thing. No, like, are you? They didn't even say, "Are you sure? Have you thought about this?" It's just, yeah, okay. Step right up. Don't be shy. When they've got some damning numbers. So these late-term abortions. What is it called? The Canadian Institute for Health Information says it's normally over 1,000 a year. Normally, this, I think last year was down a bit, but it was normally well over 1,000. There were, not including Quebec, I guess Quebec's got different numbers, there were 123 live birth abortions, and that is where they attempt to kill the fetus inside the womb, and then they go to remove it. The child's removed, and it's still alive. And then they kill it outside the womb, normally with a do not resuscitate. 28 of those were born alive and viable in Alberta alone and allowed to die. I hate this topic, but like I watched this thing. It's the ultimate third rail in Canadian politics. You can't watch this and read this and not think we've got to do something, Nigel.
Yes. Well, first of all, let's dispose of a couple of things. One is there is no credibility issue here. When I first arrived in Alberta 25 years ago, the Alberta Report, our distinguished ancestor, had just published a story about live births at the General Hospital. They had a nurse who spoke to them. They had names. They had everything. And this particular nurse explained how when babies were born alive after an abortion, they just put them on the slab and let them die. And there was scandal and outrage. And in the end, they told the nurses, just shut up and do your job. And that was the government approach. But it happens. I mean, it really does happen.
It's not as rare as we were told.
And it's been going on for 25 years that I can speak to, and I'm sure it was going on before that. And then in the Western Standard, a few days ago, Richard Durr, who is he's a pro-life activist. He's definitely got
He's the head of Pro-Life Alberta.
Yeah, Pro-Life Alberta. Yeah, I mean, this is not an entirely impartial source. Nevertheless, in a letter from Alberta's Health Minister, Adriana Lagrange, he quotes this line, please know that there is no evidence of live birth abortions in Alberta. I mean, that's just not true.
We had 28. This is from the, if I'm not mistaken, this is from the Canadian Institute of Health Information.
Yes. So
That's not some right-wing pro-life Christian fanatic.
exactly. And I don't know whether Miss Lagrange wrote that herself or whether that was prepared for her signature by somebody within the ministry. But it is not true. And that is one of the difficulties that we have with this whole issue, is knowing what to believe, because the people who want abortion and like abortion and feel that it's a right for women will certainly deny. In my earlier incarnation, while I was on an editorial board, I visited an abortion clinic with other members of the editorial board. We sat down with somebody who was performing abortions, and I said, doesn't it bother you that the thing that you are trying to abort is feeling pain? You wouldn't even do that to a puppy. Oh, they don't feel pain. That is just not true. When you see images where the needle goes in, the fetus, the baby, is squirming and wriggling and trying to get away from it. It is the most horrific thing to see. Of course they feel bloody pain. What do these people believe? So it is incredibly hard to have a sensible conversation about abortion, because people will deny what is manifestly obvious. And you have, I use CIHI statistics all the time when I'm talking about COVID. I have no reason to believe that they are wrong when they say that there were hundreds to 1,000 live births.
Yeah, that's not even just late term. That's live birth abortions, where a late term abortion fails,
right?
And the child is still born.
So I this was something I didn't get. I had to ask the question: if you are attacking a baby inside a womb with the standard vacuum cleaner apparatus that we read about, how does anything survive being sucked into a jet engine? Well, the answer is that in certain circumstances, they don't use that technology. They use the injection, and then they haul the baby out with the forceps. This is pretty graphic stuff, and I apologize for people who are put off for it. And by the way, in this tragic situation, this is not an anti-woman rant on my part. So often the people who want the abortion more than the woman is the man who's involved in the case. There's a lot of women who have abortions who don't actually want them, but somebody else does. Anyway, leaving that aside, and God bless the people who do it, who regret it. Here we have this frightful situation where the baby comes out and they just leave it on the slat. Where is the humanity? I cannot.
Yeah, and people don't like discussing it. It's a squeamish, challenging area, and a lot of people don't even realize it or know it. We are unregulated, as Derek said. I think it's through Morgenthaler in the past where that came about. We just have nothing there, which technically means there's nothing to stop this. And most countries have some degree of regulation. They draw a line, usually around viability.
Yeah.
And kind of third trimester. So.
Yeah, and we're getting well beyond that when live babies are being delivered, and this is really problematic, and we got to quit making that excuse. Look, if you snip the umbilical cord, even a premature one, and put it into an incubator, and then somebody came along and stabbed it, they will be charged with murder. Uh-huh. But if it turns out they're saying, well, I wanted an abortion, well, then we'll let that same child, same one, die. Now we're playing semantics with a murder, is what we're doing. And I know nobody likes to talk about it. I'm a libertarian. I do believe that's a separate discussion on early term ability to do that.
You've been pro-choice for a very long time.
I have.
But even you think that there's got to be a line.
The line has to be somewhere in viability. We've got a lot of science to start in other countries we could look at with where a line could be drawn. And right now when we have that void, but no politician wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Also because anyone who says there should be a line somewhere, even an extremely generous to the pro-choice sideline, they'll say, well, that's just the slippery slope to banning.
You know, it's become so fanatical. There was a great old movie that really didn't do that great, I think, but it was called Citizen Ruth. If you might remember it from the early 90s. It had Burt Reynolds and a few others, but it kind of showed the insanity of both sides. It was a glue huffer who was found pregnant, and pro-lifers had gotten hold of her, and it turned into a big fight between the crazed pro-life bunches and the crazed pro-choice bunches. And it really did show both sides as being fanatically crazed on each end of it, kind of. And I mean, it's serious business, but I mean that it really, there's no room for nuance anymore. Like back when I was, I'll give a little personal. When I was 20, I had gotten a girl pregnant. We went to, because we weren't sure what we wanted to do, and we went downtown. It used to be out by the Cecil, actually, the family planning clinic. But by the way, that's my son. We made our choice to keep. But when we chatted about it, we wanted to hear all options. We really did. But that person, the counselor or whatever, sat with us. There was only one option in her world: abort, 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 abort. That's all she was doing, was convincing you guys are too young. You aren't in a condition to deal with this. You really must, and we can set you up and giving it. Well, again, what were the other options? What about adoption? What about, supports if we want to raise it ourselves? All of that. We didn't get any of that. That's just one example, but that really did sour me on the advocates for this. We really did want to come in there and hear about all the options on the table. We've got advocates who are married to one end or another, and those advocates are, again, they want no regulation under any circumstance. I don't want to see it as advocates on someone who want to see it, illegalized from the point of conception. I would like to see a line drawn somewhere, and I think viability is kind of where we can start. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
The other thing, Derek, we want to see a few lines drawn around life at the other end too. Medical assistance and dying.
I think we've erased lines at both ends of
enough.
That's a damn good point. I mean, where you draw the line, there's only one really clear line, and that would be the hard pro-life side, which is conception. Okay, I'm not prepared to draw it there. Even if you think that is life, and I actually do think that's probably where life is created.
It's a big debate. It's a tough one.
Yeah, that is probably where life is, but it's just not a practical place to draw it. Somewhere, towards the end of the first trimester is probably a reasonable place. If it's going to be after that, it's got to be where it's absolutely medically necessary. The woman's life is at risk, that kind of thing. But we just are so fixated ideologically in this country. Look at Europe. These crazy, dumbass, liberal Europeans, every single one of them, every single European country has some line somewhere, and there's a spectrum about where they are. Mm-hmm. Ireland, I think, had it too strict at one point, and a woman died as a result. That was too far in one way. But very, very liberal countries, France, Germany, Britain, Spain, like all these, run by lefty countries, they all don't allow this. This is not cool. And I get the conservatives are terrified. They don't want to touch it. And there are things that actually could be done provincially, and the provincial government's response, when I was a provincial politician too, federal jurisdiction. Well, yes, on the criminal code it is. But the administration of healthcare is provincial, and you could decide not to allow this in these most extreme cases, because they are not exceedingly rare. They're not the majority of abortion cases, but they're not rare, and they are brutally violent.
As I said, you wouldn't do it to a puppy.
I wouldn't do it to a gopher. So at least what I do to a gopher is a lot more. Jesus,
you do it from a distance with a 22, aren't you?
Here's the reality too, and
that's quick.
I'm glad that they're bringing it to public attention, and hopefully, maybe at least it has some impact on some of the young women, who are making decisions and planning, and maybe see the horrors of what waiting too long might turn into.
Other doctors. This is ghoulish.
That too. But
this is ghoulish.
We also know politically, we've been at it so long, the chances of any politician initiative, they're not going to.
No one's going to touch this.
So all you can do is public information and hope for the best. Right now, anyways, unless something dramatically changes.
Yeah. Okay. I hated that. But you know what? So anyway, hats off. Pro-Life Alberta, Richard Durr, and the Right Now group. I'm not with them on 100% of where they go with these things, but I think they've done a real public service bringing this forward in a very tasteful way. This wasn't a bunch of graphic images designed to turn someone's stomach. I think they made a logical argument. Actually, and they did journalism here, going out, getting information, video, proving their case. So hats off to them. That was good work.
The front page of the National Post of the weekend.
Yeah.
That's good for them.
Okay. Don't have enough time for mine, but you two get a parting shot. We'll start with Nigel.
Well, yeah, I had something else in mind, but what I would say is that if they did outside the womb to a child what they do inside the womb to an unborn baby, we wouldn't be having this discussion. It wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah. Well, and we don't even we're not even willing to when a person murders an obviously pregnant woman, we don't give them 2 counts of murder in Canada, even though that's very often the intent is it's kind of abortion by execution of the mother.
They don't want to talk about it.
It's a man who doesn't want the child. That happens, and they still only get 1 count of murder. God, we're messed up. Cory, take us through another topic.
I'll just go quick. It's healthcare, but not nearly as rough. But I like that Premier Smith has released Bill 11. I just love the irony that I remember Bill 11 when Ralph Klein did it. Yeah, we're looking at healthcare reform, but he backed off, and he said that was one of his great regrets. I hope Premier Smith does not, because we need healthcare reform terribly. Please, Ms. Smith, stand your ground on this one. Let's get that private-public ability out there, because our system's failing and people can't deny it anymore.
All right. Gentlemen, Nigel, Cory, John around the studio, thank you very much. Thank all of you for joining us today on The Pipeline. Remember, if you're not a member, you're freeloading, you cheap bastard. Go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content and get past the paywall, blocking you from getting the very best news of the West. Oh, yeah. And one last thing. The United Conservative Party's AGM is this weekend. The Western Standard crew is headed north to cover it all weekend in Edmonton. We are going to be throwing a very large, very loud, and boisterous hospitality suite. The Western Standard Rager, we're calling it. Free drinks, free food. It's going to be a lot of fun to be right at the convention grounds. So if you're an Alberta United Conservative Party member or visiting from out of province and you go into the convention, come on by and have a drink on us. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.